Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to show you how exactly I tracked my fertility after coming off birth control and how I got pregnant pretty much straight away in my second cycle of trying. So the one thing that you need to make tracking your fertility so much easier is obviously ovulation tests. And I will link the product and the box that I got off of Amazon in the description below because it was probably the best purchase with anything to do with fertility. So these came in a box of quite a lot. I can't remember the exact number, but I will link it down below. And it had a bunch of these and a bunch of test pregnancy strips as well. So this is exactly how I laid it out. I started off with cycle number 1 after coming off of birth control. On the left hand side I had the date and then I had the cycle day right next to it. So as you can see, each cycle starts at cycle day 1, which is the first day of your period. So for me, we weren't actually trying this cycle. This was just letting my body go back to normal after coming off of birth control. So as you can see, I had a withdrawal bleed for pretty long. It wasn't an exact period. It was just a withdrawal bleed, my body going back to normal after coming off of the hormone. And then I started taking my ovulation test strips, which is what is inside this packet. So I started taking those every day in the morning as soon as I woke up, and as you can see, it got to cycle day 14, 15, 16, 17, still no ovulation, and it was actually on cycle day 22 that I had my ovulation day. So the way that these ovulation test strips work is that you'll get 2 lines no matter if you're ovulating or not. So unlike a pregnancy test where if you have 2 lines it's likely that you are pregnant, so with an ovulation test strip, 2 lines does not necessarily mean you are ovulating. So the first line is the test line, the second line is the control line. So when your test line is actually darker than your control line, that is when you're at peak time for ovulation. So you're actually not ovulating exactly right then. You're ovulating 12 to 24 hours after you get that first peak test. I then just have a random pregnancy test thrown in the mix right there, and that is what also came in the pregnancy test pouch, which is a little pink pouch. And that was just to make sure that I wasn't actually already pregnant. So moving on to cycle number 2, this is when we actually started trying to conceive, which is what TTC stands for. So as you can see, there was the date on this side and cycle day 1 beginning, and that is when I had my period. I then began taking ovulation test strips beginning around cycle day 8, just because I didn't know when my body was actually ovulating. So I was sort of seeing what was happening with my body right here. And as you can see, I ovulated on cycle day 13 this cycle. Well, that's when I got my peak, which means I ovulated around 12 to 24 hours after I got that peak, which is why here, that's sort of like my fertile zone between cycle day 13, 14, and 15. And the reason there is so many ovulation test strips is because I took one every morning and one every night, so I could see exactly when I got my peak. So I got it on cycle day 13 in the morning, and then it was still pretty dark at night, but the next morning it started to fade away, which means I did actually get my peak right on cycle day 13. So you don't have to take as many as I did, but I just wanted to see exactly what was happening with my body. Obviously then, once you've got your peak, you only ovulate once every cycle, so I stopped taking them, and that's when I moved on to taking the pregnancy tests. So DPO stands for days past ovulation, and I did start taking pregnancy tests really early. You won't usually get a line even if you are pregnant because there's just not enough hormone in your system to be able to detect it on the strip. You'll usually start seeing a line around 10 DPO, but I was pretty eager, as you can see, and I wanted to get a nice sort of gradient, so if it did show up in, it would get darker and darker every day that you took a pregnancy test. However, this cycle I didn't get pregnant. I did then end up getting my period. So from this cycle, I now know that I ovulate around cycle day 14, and that my cycle is approximately 27 to 28 days long. Moving on to cycle number 3 of trying to conceive. So again, got my period on November 21st, cycle day 1, and then the same thing again. Started taking my ovulation test strips once in the morning and once at night, and then I got my peak on cycle day 14. So you do the deed around here. You can do it as soon as you get that peak, or you can do it 12 to 24 days after. You can also do it before, but you obviously don't know if you're ovulating, because sperm does live in your system for up to 5 days. So if you do it beforehand and then you ovulate, you could also get pregnant from that. I got my peak, I ovulated, we did the deed, and I stopped taking the ovulation test strips and moved on to taking the pregnancy tests. So again, I started at 4 DPO because I am eager and just wanted to see that positive line straight away. So that's when I started taking them every day in the morning. Straight away in the morning, you're gonna get the best line if you take it in the morning when your urine is pretty dense and got the most hormone. And as you can see, 10 DPO, there is a very, very faint line. And that is the day I knew I was pregnant, on December 15th, 2018. So after I got my positive on one of these cheap strips, I then moved on to a more expensive test. So this was the first pregnancy test that I took, and there is a very, very faint line going down. I did take these about 4 months ago now. It's April, and obviously I got pregnant in December, so these are pretty old, but as you can see, I wrote on it 10 DPO, so I knew exactly when it was. It came up with a line. I then took a clear blue digital, however it said not pregnant, because those tend to not be able to detect until about 12 to 13 or even 14 DPO, and I was doing it at 10 DPO. So instead I took a first response, which can detect that early, and it came up with a positive yes, and that is how I knew I was pregnant for sure. I then stopped taking the tests, but as you can see, the lines did get darker, and they would have continued to get darker if I had taken them daily. But this was on 14 DPO, just 2 days after this test, and as you can see, it is pretty clear. That line is a lot darker, and the digital did come up saying pregnant. So that is how I got pregnant. So the reason I made this video is because when I was trying to get pregnant, these are the types of videos that I literally watched all day, every day, just seeing how other people were tracking their fertility. And I thought, if any of you are trying, maybe you'd be interested in how I tracked mine. So if you are watching this video and you are trying, good luck to you, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in my next one.